the author of Evidence for the Resurrection is the title of this pamphlet that I have here in front of me. Evidence for the Resurrections, Answers to Skeptics' Questions. And he is published by Rose Publishing, and he joins us now. Eric, how are you?
Very well. It's glad to hear from you.
Hey, Eric, is this a book or is this a what do you call this?
I would call it a pamphlet. It's the ideal size to fit in the back of your Bible.
That's
only about 12 pages long.
That's what I was going to call it, but if you wrote a book, I didn't want to, insult you by calling your work a pamphlet here. But this is what it is. It's a pamphlet, but it's easy to read, and you can do it in a little while. It's not. There's a place for books on this subject as well, but this is something that you can digest and keep handy. It's called Evidence for the Resurrection. Why'd you write this?
Well, just to make a correction, I'm not the author of that pamphlet. Evidence for the Resurrection is a kind of like a tract. It's about the size of half a sheet of paper. It's laminated, and a very handy thing for Christians to either keep for themselves or to pass out to someone else. I am a writer for Rose Publishing Company, who is the publishers of the pamphlet, and I've written a number of things on apologetics and a number of other works. I did not write this particular item. It is a composite work from multiple writers.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So, Eric.
However, I've been a Christian because I was witnessed to by a friend in college who shared the gospel with me, and I do know what it's like to be a skeptic. I do have what I would sometimes call a skeptic's mind, but a pastor's heart. And I I have a strong appreciation for what it's like to grow up wondering, well, was Jesus real? Maybe this was all written up, or maybe it was a myth that was passed on. And so I think I'm really qualified to answer this, partly because I've been studying the defense of the Christian faith for over 30 years.
So, Eric, that's a great question. Somebody, you could hear this on a college campus, hear this in an office somewhere. Somebody could email you with the question, how do we know Jesus rose from the dead? How do we go about answering a question like that?
I would start with the issues of history. There are a number of sources that we go to find out what history is. You could say, well, what about Christian history? Maybe it's written by people that are already believers. Maybe they had something to gain by writing up this story. Well, in the very first place, we can have evidence from outside of Christianity. That is, from contemporary writers who were not Christians and didn't want to be. People that were either of Jewish background or people that were Stoic philosophers, people that were Romans. For example, a couple of ones, the Jewish historian Josephus, who well-known author, referred to Jesus several times in his histories. The Roman historian Tacitus, Cornelius Tacitus, who lived A.D. 55 to 120, wrote two very well-accepted histories of the Roman Empire. Part one was the Annals of Rome, which was before Nero, and part two was the histories from Nero until about A.D. 95. And he referred to the life of Jesus Christ and declared specifically that he was crucified under Pontius Pilate. A governor of Asia Minor in the province of Bithynia, if you have listeners who are New Testament readers, they'll recognize the word Bithynia as referred to as one of the places that Paul visited during his trips. At any rate, Pliny the Younger was governor, and he refers to the Christians who were prevalent there in the early first century. Thallus, A.D. 52, was another historian. A.D. 52 is only like 20 years after the death of Jesus, and he makes a reference to Jesus Christ and tries to explain away why there was darkness at the time of Christ's crucifixion. And so we have multiple sources outside of Christianity there that definitely claim that Christ existed and was real. And the fact is there are no serious scholars today who deny the existence of Jesus Christ. Even those groups that discuss the historical Jesus and so forth, the quest for historical Jesus, none of them deny that the historicity of Jesus, that he was a real figure who lived in Palestine, who obviously worked miracles and gathered disciples, and who was executed under the rain. The other issue is well, what about the resurrection? What about the other things that are the core of the Christian faith. And actually, we find our best information from the New Testament documents, which were written by eyewitnesses, people who were present at the time. Moreover, the New Testament documents, and I'm specifically thinking of the four Gospels, which we refer to as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, those were written before A.D. 70. So if Jesus died around the year A.D. 30, or maybe as late as A.D. 33, and the city of Jerusalem was destroyed by Titus in A.D. 70, it's only like a 40-year gap at the most between that period of time. Now, why can I say that the New Testament was written, all the Gospels were written before A.D. 70, whereas some people say, well, it might have been A.D. 100, it might have been later, even in the 2nd century, after 100 A.D. And the reason I would say that is this. For people that read the New Testament, they know that the Gospel writers are all very keen on showing how Jesus fulfilled prophecy, that he was the seed of the woman, that he came from Bethlehem, as you read, the story of Jesus' birth in Matthew, for example. Matthew chapter 2, it says how he fulfilled the prophecy to be born in Bethlehem. In Matthew, he fulfilled the prophecy he was going to be born of a virgin, that kings would come to him. Matthew records Jesus, the fulfillment of the prophecies of the massacre of the innocents. And all these times that prophecy is fulfilled from the Old Testament, the Gospel writers all said what came to pass just as Jesus had said. If he did a short-term event, like the cursing of the fig tree, he said, where Jesus said, let no fruit grow upon you forever, the disciples recorded, or short-term prophecies that he gave. And both long-term prophecies, that he would be betrayed for 30 pieces of silver, that false witnesses would come to accuse him, those are all prophecies that have their fulfillment recorded in the New Testament Gospels. However, what about Jesus' very clear prophecy about the destruction of Jerusalem, where Jesus said, Matthew 24, the day is going to come when there's not going to be one stone upon you that shall not be thrown down. Mark 13, and Luke chapter 17, Luke chapter 21. How come those aren't recorded as being fulfilled according to the word of the Lord, whereas every other one was? And the only rational answer is that the New Testament documents were composed before the destruction of the Jerusalem. I think people knew that it was coming, and I think the New Testament authors were clearly aware that the destruction of Jerusalem was literally at hand very quickly, because they referred in Matthew 24. It's interesting that this passage is referred to several times. Let the reader understand that when he refers to, when we see the abomination of desolation, don't go back to the city, don't return, but run as fast as you can to the hills, as Jesus said. He said, let the reader understand. This is, which is a sidelong statement that's saying this will occur.
Eric, let me interrupt you just for a second, because I do want to go to the question of the resurrection itself. Obviously, on Easter Sunday morning, when the women went to the tomb, they found the stone rolled away and the tomb was empty. But some people have concocted other theories, that the stolen body, the disciples stole the body, the Jews stole the body, the Romans stole the body, the misplaced body, the gardener hid the body, the swoon theory. Say something about some of these different theories that people have come up with to explain the fact that the tomb was empty on Sunday morning.
Okay. Well, after Jesus died, which there's no dispute about that, the question is, did he stay dead, or was he actually come back to life? Now, the swoon theory says that Jesus was in the tomb and that the ointments and spices that the women brought to the tomb were actually like a healing balm, which was intended to heal Jesus. And that was a theory of a man like Ghulam Ahmad, founder of the Ahmadiyya movement of Islam.
Eric, a man who had hung on a cross. Yeah. A man who had hung on a cross and been flogged, and you throw some spices on him, and he's good to go. Medicine. And he's good to go. That's laughable. I mean, that's ridiculous. Anyway.
Well, as a matter of fact, Mr. Ahmad actually tried to sell the ointment of Jesus in the Punjab as something which would not only bring people back from the dead, but was also a cure for dysentery and polio, and cholera.
Okay.
Yeah, so
So that's called the swoon theory.
that is the swoon theory, that Jesus
Yeah.
swooned and then he came back to life. And then when Jesus comes and says, it is I, my feet, handle me and fell, he's saying, yes, I'm back alive. He's not trying to claim that he was rose from the dead, but the disciples misunderstood.
Okay.
Well, the
Well,
fact is, those nails went through his wrists. They didn't just simply go through his palm.
I know. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, either believe it or don't, but don't give me this halfway stuff that you can explain it in human terms. A guy comes back from the dead because he gets, some spices after he experienced what he did on a cross with the nails driven through your hands and your feet.
And his feet. He wouldn't even have been walking.
No,
he would have
I mean,
been
that's just
crawling on his knees.
I can't believe
We're through it
I
all.
can't believe a serious person would even propose something like that. We're talking to Eric Pement, Pement. How do you've got this? It's the pamphlet. It's called Evidence for the Resurrection, and you go through all the questions related to Jesus and like what is the resurrection? Jesus was Jesus a mythological figure? Some say Jesus was just a man. You answer all these objections to Jesus. Jesus' followers made it all up, and so on. So this is an excellent resource for Christians to have handy. And how do you access this? How do you get this?
Well, you could certainly go to the publisher, which is rose-publishing.
ROSE? ROSE?
ROSE,
Okay.
like Rose of Sharon, rose-publishing.com. And you could get copies in single or in bulk. You could get them through the Internet. Because of the closeness of the time towards the Resurrection Sunday, I'm going to actually recommend that if Christians are interested, that they go to their local Christian bookstore. Rose makes these things available in packets of like 10 and also packets of 25, and you get a great discount by ordering them in bulk and then passing them out to your Sunday school class or adult Bible study. I've done it myself. I think it's a great idea because you get a greater value, better bang for the buck, as it were, by buying a packet of 10 or say 25, and really useful.
Eric and Ray, Eric, what you said earlier, I think it needs to be re-emphasized here because you don't hear this talked about much. A lot of critics of Christianity say, well, yeah, but you guys, everything you say is just the Bible. So you're using the Bible to verify or to give authority to or accuracy to the Bible, and there's nothing wrong with that if the Bible can stand up to that kind of scrutiny, and it can. But what you said, Eric, was there were non-biblical sources that referenced the person of Jesus Christ in history, and one of them you mentioned was a Jewish historian. Was he a contemporary of Josephus was his name? What was his full name? Do you know, Ray or Eric?
Josephus was certainly not a contemporary. He was present during the destruction of Jerusalem, and that's why his destruction is recorded.
But he was a Jewish
historian.
Yeah, he was a Jewish historian
and
that
survived.
lived within 100 years of Jesus. And
Flavius Josephus was his name.
Yeah, that was his whole name. And he talks about Jesus in his writings. True?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, actually in several places. Let me give you an argument which doesn't even require knowledge of history that much or even knowledge of the Bible. And let's just ask ourselves, well, suppose that Jesus was just a good man and that he didn't really rise from the dead. What would we expect to happen? Here's what we'd expect to happen. We would expect that Jesus would be treated as a martyr and that we would have a tomb which would be venerating him. For example, the other major religion, as we all know, is Islam. What happened when Muhammad died? Well, when Muhammad died, he was buried in the Masjid of the Prophet, which is in Medina, or some people pronounce it Medina, but the real pronunciation is Medina, which is in Israel. And people come to the tomb of Muhammad. Other people that are believed to be prophets, their places of burial are well known, whether it's someone like the Bab, the founder of the Baha'i faith, or if we believe that Moses, for example, died on the other side of the Jordan River, east of Jordan, in the country which would now be called Jordan. So we would recognize that if Jesus was a martyr, there would be somehow a visit to his tomb and a commemoration of his martyrdom.